This is our season 3 of Mrs. C's podcast for parents, teachers, and administrators. We've been away for a little while, but we're back with exciting guests to offer great resources for parents, teachers, and administrators. We're here to invite you to listen and get real guidance and practical resources to support you in your home and in your classroom. So we're happy to have you here. Take a listen. And welcome to our first episode. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat with me. And to get started, why don't you tell me who you are and what you do, and maybe how you're connected to early childhood education or families in general.
Okay, so pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me on. My name is Lisa Ross, and I am an educator. I've taught elementary, primarily the primary grades, and ended up being a school leader for a middle school, high school. In 2019, I left that role, and it really shaped how I deal with families and children, looking at backwards design, that what was not necessarily front loaded for high school, that we needed to figure out how to go back there instead of trying to remediate so much in high school. I left that role in 2019 and started Sage Pathways, where I now run a tutoring and mentoring program for kinder through 12th grade students, and do family workshops and help children figure out what their path to post-secondary success looks like.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge that people have right now? Well, the top 3 in education. Top 5?
Wow, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I think this is just me that sometimes the people that are far removed from school sites and the classroom are making decisions that affect the classroom without thinking about the ramifications on the children, the educator, and the family. So, we have a meeting, someone figures out a new way to do something, and we go to implementing it without really thinking about the long-term effects. I think another thing that is a little off with education is sustainable change takes about 10 years. And typically what happens is we try something for a year, maybe 2 if we're lucky, 3 if you're really, really lucky, and we tossed the baby and the bathwater out. I think we have to try things longer. I think we need more longitudinal studies to speak accurately about what's going on in the educational system. I also think that we need to do a better job of making sure our parents feel welcome on our campuses. Parents, my second AP said something to me that totally shifted my paradigm with dealing with families, because sometimes I get a little frustrated. I set a meeting, they may not show up. I remember one day I went to her and she said, you have to remember that sometimes a schoolhouse is a place of trauma for these parents. And so returning to the scene of the crime is not one of their favorite things to do. So then it made me shift how I did conferences, and making it more inviting, working around their schedule as opposed to mine. And things of that nature. So those are the 3 things that I think we're not taking enough time to see things through, to make sure that whatever you place works. It's not going to work in a year or 2, especially when you get to the high school level, because they've had so many years of doing things multiple ways. And then also, people that are far removed, involve the people that are boots on the ground and get their feedback and actually listen. And then thirdly, making sure that our families feel welcomed and that they are an integral part of their child's education. They're their first best advocate.
So talk more about how Sage Pathways helps mitigate some of the problems that you see in education right now.
Well, for one, I love that we're tutoring our children and we're meeting them where they are. We match our tutors based upon like interests and sometimes some of the same life instances that they've had so that these tutors can mentor them and say, you know what, I was where you were. I have one. He was like, I hated math. I was horrible at math until I got a tutor mentor that actually took their time with me. Didn't get frustrated because I didn't get it the first time, second or third. And so those are the types of tutors that I'm looking for because, again, if you're already traumatized because you don't think you're good at something, one, we need to build your skills, but we also need to build your self-confidence.
Uh-huh.
So that's one thing that I believe that we are doing, that I know that we're doing because I get the texts, the emails about their
Mm-hmm.
children, how things are shifting. With the parents, I do parent workshops. I try to share with them how they can be their child's best advocate and sharing them the spaces that they need to be in, particularly in the public school settings. Are you going to that school site council meeting? Are you going to ELAC? Are you going to all these meetings where they're determining how the money is being spent and making sure that your voice is heard? And even if you're the only one in the room, you still have a very powerful voice. So let's get you the know-how and let you know that we're in your corner, to help back you up.
I think we do that at Oak Tree Learning Center as well, because I always say that every parent has parented for the first time every time they parent. And what's stunning is that we expect them to be good at it, right? So I have two boys, very, very different. Parenting boy number one is radically different than parenting boy number two, but I have to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm someone who has a ton of tools, right? So we're
That
expecting
part.
parents to get it right multiple times with no tools. So how do you give them the tools, or which tools do you even give them so that as they're parenting, they have more skills like, mindfulness, I can throw that at it. Positive discipline, how do you give them the tools that they need?
So again, my parents have my cell phone number. So if they run into, I had a scholar whose mom was struggling. He was 8 years old and they indirectly expelled him. I'm
Wait, wait,
like,
wait. You cannot just run past that statement. What do you mean indirectly?
well, I probably used indirectly in the wrong context, but he was a spirited little boy,
Mm,
right? Needed a lot of breaks.
as
He
many.
wasn't identified as having special needs, but he needed quite a few breaks. And so one of the teachers on the campus happened to say, you know what, when you feel like you can't take it, come to my classroom. She talked to the teacher. The teacher initially said, okay. But then when he started doing it frequently,
Mm,
then it became an issue. So they're calling mom in for meetings, all this other stuff. And then they call her in for a final meeting. She didn't call me at this time. They called her in and said, you know what? If you don't move him to another school, we're going to have to expel him. And I'm like, and she said, I did it. She said, I was just tired. And I'm like, you let them expel your kid without going through the process.
mm,
And again, that is something that parents don't know. When you go into a schoolhouse and they say, take them out or we're expelling them, most parents are like, we don't want them expelled, so we're just going to move. Well, there's a process to make sure that the school has done what they needed to do and that they created a plan, executed it, and collaborated with you. She didn't have that. This little boy
mm,
was 8 years old.
mm.
And so I'm like, he's leaving the classroom to go to someone who gave him permission to come. Why is that an issue? Those are the things that our parents need to understand that, again, you are your child's first and best advocate. And if you don't know, try to find someone who's going to be in your corner. I asked her, I said, why didn't you call me? I was just tired.
Mm,
And I thought that it was easier rather than continuing the fight.
yeah.
So that's one way I think that we could support our parents by, and I think YouTube even, because sometimes they don't have time to come on a meeting. But if they can go look up people like us who have experience, who've created videos to say, hey, if this happens, this is what you need to do. If you need to reach out to me, here's some contact information. If not me, reach out to somebody like me in your community that can
Right.
help you through the process.
Exactly. I think, to your point, so often parents are tired because I don't think that people realize the number of people who make a comfortable living to have leisure time is actually quite low.
Hmm.
And leisure time is important for thinking and resting and creativity. Like that's the time when you can think about problems and come up with solutions. But oftentimes, if parents don't have the kind of job or don't have the kind of environment, in our school, parents are, I got to pick you up, I got to go to work, I got to get you home, you have to get fed, dressed for bed. I mean, it's constant go. So when are
Hmm.
you going to even have a second to breathe and say, you know what? Let's talk about this issue, you know? And it is oftentimes easier to just extricate yourself, which then traumatizes the next generation of people,
Right.
and I don't like the mixed message. You can do this, but now that we told you you can do this, you can't do this.
Right.
I don't know. What do you ever talk with administrators and say, yo, what are you doing? Like, how is this
All the
help?
time. That is one of the reasons why I left my administrative role,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't your typical principal,
Mm-hmm.
right? I knew it was a small school, so I knew every one of my kids. When I saw them having a crazy day, I would go and talk to them. What's going on? Find out something's not right at home. Try to figure out how to help them support them through it. I think sometimes administrators forget that they were children too. I would ask my
Mm,
teachers all the time. I was like, raise your hand if you were the perfect student. You sat there, you were quiet, you turned every assignment in on time, you didn't ask to go to the bathroom to escape, you didn't do any of these things.
right.
So, being that you were a child and you use these things, why are we not allowing them a certain amount of latitude? I'm not saying that they should run ripshot, but some latitude, right? And remembering that we were once in that spot. What I think is administrators are sandwiched, right? They're in the middle, they're the meat in the sandwich. And so sometimes they reactive because they're like, I'm getting it from both ends and they're tired, right? And so I don't think a lot of them feel they have the flexibility or the opportunity to do things out of the box, because you get a notebook, a notebook filled with stuff. This is how we're going to do it. No latitude really offered. And so I think that that is the biggest thing with administrators. And I think that's why you see a burnout with it,
Mm,
because you're tired of fighting the system to potentially do what is right for the students. So how we change that, I don't know,
mm-hmm.
because I think sometimes we forget we're there for the kids,
Oh, for
not to
sure.
check a box off, right?
Right.
And so when you have that box that you have to check, you're like, okay, let me get this done and whatever. So I think providing a little bit more latitude, for people to do what they think is best for the children in their care. Because again, not every school, not every child, not every teacher, we're not all the same. People, it's equity, not equality, right?
Mm,
So I think that that would change how things are being done. And again, getting the people who are boots on the ground at the table.
mm. I find it really interesting. There's two things that as an administrator, because I was also an administrator, a teacher for a long time. There was always a couple of things I found fascinating. The first thing is we all know about learning, and having
Hmm.
people talk at you to learn is not ideal. But teachers famously talk at people, and even in professional development, you're getting talked at. So even though we all agree that that's not the ideal way for most people to learn, it is everywhere. And so, like, a more didactic approach becomes the way we do everything. So that's the first thing. The second thing is nobody wants to sit down all day. Unless you have some kind of physical limitation, you get up, you walk around, you stretch, you look out the window, you talk to your dog, you make a sandwich, like you're up and moving all day. Even your
Mhm.
devices tell you to get up and move. But school is structured in a way where we are anchoring people to desks with small intervals in between and expecting their attention span to not be affected by that. And so when you're talking to parents, so that's one set of things. When you're talking to parents and talking to an administrator and you're talking about that sandwich, do parents, you think, understand that oftentimes administrators feel boxed in because they have the parent coming at them, they have the district level and state level coming. What do those conversations to help facilitate that understanding and perspective building look like?
You're right. I think a lot of parents aren't cognizant of that parent, because as an educator, you're taught to keep certain things in house, right? So if you're saying that, you're being vulnerable, right? And that's not allowed, right? You've got to be the law, right? And so it's the very rare parent that understands that, you feel that you only have so much latitude. And so when I'm talking to parents and, I was talking to one the other day and I was explaining to her about her son that, the school's not going to tell you every single thing, right? So you're going to have to dig. If you want to know this information, you're going to have to dig. And so she said, but I don't know how. So I said, okay, I'll dig for you and return it back to you. Come to find out, her son needed something. And she was like, the counselor is rebuffing his request. And I'm like, there's a reason why this person is rebuffing this request. Because to me, it seems like a simple thing. Well, come to find out, the school district had been sued. And so for that reason, they were no longer allowed to offer this particular course of study, right?
Oh.
To help the kids who were credit deficient. They have a very strict policy now. Whereas before you could go to, say, continuation school, you could do Brigham Young and things of that nature to make up credits. You can't do that anymore in certain districts because there was a lawsuit, the district lost, and they paid money out. Now, this parent didn't know that. She thought the lady was just being challenging. And so she didn't know the right questions to ask, right? To get the lady to share. So, yes, I do believe that not only administrators, but people outside of the classroom, they feel as though they're handcuffed, that they can't do certain things. And then they're also disappointed that they can no longer do these things that support the scholars and the families. So there's so much red tape that keeps getting added that makes educators as a whole, makes it a little bit more challenging to serve our families in the way that we deem fit.
Yeah. I think teachers are kind of tired. They just want to teach. You get into teaching because you love your subject matter and you love talking about your subject matter and you usually love children, and think that they would be a great recipient for that information. But teaching has changed a lot, There's a lot of worksheets
Mm-hmm.
and packets. What?
Yes, that's control, right? That is control. Experiential learning is loud, it's messy, right? It requires you to relinquish quite a bit of control. And I don't want my classroom to be out of control and have an administrator come and think that I can't control my classroom, right? So I think that helps to hammer, and it's easier, right? It's easier to hand a child a worksheet and say, fill this out.
Is it
And then
easier?
it's, I think
Because I
so,
feel
because
like then you have to find like 50 worksheets, whereas you can do one thing, one activity where people are engaged for a half an hour rather than 5 different worksheets. You know what I mean?
okay, yes, when you put it that way.
So,
When you put it that way.
but I hear you about the easier in that it's more controlled. It's
Right.
definitely more like, okay, you're on number one. Hold on. Everybody get finished number one so we can go to number two. Whereas, like you said, with a more organic environment, everybody's doing everything all over the
Right.
place.
Right.
What do you
And
think?
so again,
Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, again, as a teacher in a classroom, I've had teacher friends who were marked down on their evaluation because their classroom was noisy. Whereas, yeah, you don't have classroom control because your room is noisy. And I'm like, okay, did we look at what was going on in the room? Were they having discussions? What was going on? So I think those stories for the lunchroom help to
Mm,
shape as well, the level of control. And then also sometimes even supplies. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes teachers are spending money out of their pocket
mm,
to get the things. And so it's easier to run a Xerox copy than go buy
mm,
something to show buoyancy or whatever. Let's watch a video and we'll do a worksheet about it, kind of thing.
mm, mm. What about parents? How are parents feeling and reacting to the education that their kids are getting?
Most want more. They want more. What I've heard repeatedly is they feel the teachers are tired so
Mm,
that they don't have the patience. You know what I'm
mhm,
saying? They don't have the patience to spend the extra time to share it again with Tony, right? Because I have a pacing schedule. I have a bell schedule that I have to follow and things of that nature. I have to check these boxes off, or it's going to reflect in my evaluation. And so they feel that the teachers don't have enough time
mm,
to do what they need to do to support their children if they're not that child that's finishing the worksheet in 30 seconds and everything is correct. That child that is stuck at number two and needs help, the teacher doesn't necessarily have time to hit them the way that they possibly could. So the child doesn't feel like, hey, you're holding me up. I need to get this done, kind of thing.
So tell me how do you address that? How do you help children move around or get a little noisy or do something that's different than what they experience during the day?
So with my program, it's built in. You have brain breaks and you get to pick the one you want.
Mm,
So we have a list. Which one do you want to do today? And it could be, I just want to walk around, or I just want to walk away and get a glass of water. They get to choose whatever type of brain break they take during the session.
mhm,
And the tutors are required to build them into the session. So we're going to have a brain break here. And if the child says they don't want it, that's up to them. They get to self regulate. So if
mm.
they don't want it, we push through. If they want it, they get it.
How do you find parents for your program? Do you have partnerships with school districts?
Initially, it started in LA and then we moved out this way. And so I also get parents who refer other parents to the program because they see the shift in their children's confidence and in their level of ability to do the work without being frustrated.
Mm,
So that is how we typically get our students. And for the tutors, I haven't had to recruit a tutor in about a year and a half because
nice.
my tutors refer people who are like-minded to the program. So
What's the
that's how
background of your tutors?
they're college students. Every one of them attend a four-year university. They have majors that are aligned. We do ELA and math, so they have majors that are aligned with that, and they work with the children in ELA and math to help support them.
Mm. Are these people who they may or may not be interested in ELA and math as, like teaching it, but
Right.
perhaps they're going to be a reporter or maybe
Correct.
they'll be an engineer. And so they look at this. Do they get community service hours or anything like that for the work?
They get a stipend. They get a
Okay.
stipend per session. And so my thing with the program is twofold in that I want to support students who are going through school who are most times having to find funding to do the little extracurricular things that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that does that. But also, I'm much far removed from the students that we work with. And I find that they better relate to someone who is closer to them in age, who can share the latest trend or whatever they're talking about because I have no clue. And so
That was
I
a
find
very
that
elegant way to say that, by the way.
I'm old, yeah. Yeah. And so it helps on both ends. We have had a couple of tutors shift their major from what they were doing to say that now they want to teach. So
Mm.
that is a byproduct that is excellent because they have the heart for the students
Mm.
and they have the commitment, and dealing with the students also give them just a taste of what being in the classroom would be like. So that's my segue too, to say that I believe that student teaching should be done earlier
Oh,
in
yeah.
because I think a lot my last year in the classroom I had two student teachers. One was phenomenal. She was just like a fish in water. Another one, she had spent all this money to get her credential and she hated it. She absolutely hated it. She would cry every day
Oh,
and she ended up
no.
going back to what she was doing before. So I'm like, at that point, I was like, why don't we do it a little earlier before people have invested all of this time? Because she did the right thing by saying
Mhm.
this is not for me.
Yeah.
But I believe we also have a lot of teachers who've spent a lot of time preparing for it, but they realize they hate it. But because they did it, I'm going to stick it
Yeah.
through.
Until I find something better. It's interesting. Where I went to college, you were in the classroom day one.
Really?
Yeah, we had our Education 101 was we did some theory work and then we were sent to classrooms to watch the theory play out and then report on the application of that theory. And so it was either Education 101 or Education 102. Like it was definitely one of the first two classes. We started going out into schools and experiencing what a classroom was like. Now, because as you would say, I am far removed from elementary school students, things have changed in the classroom.
Right.
And so I think it is much different. How big are class sizes these days?
Um, it depends on the area. Some are smaller than the others, depending on, if it's a bedroom community or not. But I've seen as many as 35 in a classroom.
For
Now,
elementary?
no, sorry, for elementary, they're still around in the 20s.
Okay.
They're still in the 20s. Um, but another thing that we used to have to help out that I don't see quite as much is an aide. There's no
Mm.
aides in the room. So you're running that whole classroom by yourself and figuring out how to differentiate. And so again, that's why I think we also go back to the worksheets.
Mm. With your tutoring, how big is the sessions? Are they one-on-one or small group?
They're one-on-one. They get 2 sessions per week of up to an hour. And then we do 8-week sessions so that one, the child gets acclimated to the beginning of the year and they're in a rhythm. And
Hmm.
then it gives the tutors a chance to get acclimated to their year. And then we do a second session in the fall, and then we do a session in the summer to kind of plug holes and front load for the next school year.
And so it's almost like, 100,000 years ago when we had pullouts and you would sit
Mhm.
and work on basics with somebody, you provide that service. So the basics, and I'm going to assume it happens after school or does it happen during the school day?
It happens after school and it's completely virtual.
Oh,
It's completely virtual. Initially, it was started in the pandemic, and we did try to go to in person, but what we found is the tutors didn't necessarily have reliable transportation, and some of our
oh.
families didn't have reliable transportation. So someone would make it to a spot, and the other person couldn't make it. So virtual removes that barrier, and it works just fine.
I was going to say, do you think kids have adapted to a virtual, a situation where they're virtually learning with people?
I believe so. I believe so. I've had like 3 students was like, I don't want to do it online. And other than that, everybody is fine.
So I'm thinking about learning loss. We're talking about COVID and they're talking about learning loss. My theory is that learning loss for COVID just accelerated learning loss that it was already happening. Is that what you're finding? And, what are you seeing in terms of how kids are learning and how much they're learning?
I agree that learning loss was just exacerbated by COVID. It was already in existence. We knew that by the data that we were gathering before COVID. And so I do think that aside from learning loss, so I think that a lot of learning did not happen at all during COVID. Okay, it was more like a babysitting service, and it wasn't necessarily by choice. Again, no one had planned that we're going to be online and having to figure out how to do this stuff online for as long as we did, right? So teachers were learning how to do it on the fly, and they were doing the best they could with what they had. Going back into the school, you then had kids, they were accustomed to what they were doing online. And so when stuff went back to the classroom, with the gaps that they had, they were widened, and teachers didn't necessarily know how to mitigate it. And so I think COVID, like you said, just exacerbated what was happening before. And that's why I love what you're doing, because your children are getting that foundational piece. In addition to that, too, like you said, with COVID, a lot of our kids don't go to preschool, right? And so they're given the phone to learn what they need to learn, or the iPad or whatever. So all of that being that they may not have gone to preschool, so there's a gap, right? Then they go into COVID and people are having to figure out how to do it. So you can't get the full content when we're figuring it out as we're building the plane, as we're flying.
Right, right.
So I think that is what has caused a bigger gap in the learning. And so will it fix itself? No. Will it be fixed in a year? No. Again, it's going to take a while. These kids are probably going to graduate high school with these gaps if we don't figure out how to help plug it really quickly.
Well, speaking of not being diplomatic, I think no one's being honest about the fact that a lot of COVID, even kids who were in school, in a lot of cases, it was just performative because you were worried about your PPE. You were worried about contracting. You're worried about your grandma who died. You're worried about this, that. And we forget that we had protests and like all kinds of other upheaval that was a lot for me as an adult to process.
Right.
I'm a whole, fully formed adult who has decent social and emotional regulation.
Right.
And trying to figure all of the stuff that happened during those 2 years. And we are expecting little people, and little people go up to high school because they're not people, because if they were people, they would have a job and be on their own, right? They're still little people, and we should treat them like that, right? And understanding that this was a lot, especially when you weren't learning in the first place.
Right.
And I don't think anyone's being really honest about the fact that people right now, this day, are graduating without knowing how to do a whole litany of things.
That is true.
And so I just, I really appreciate you helping to fill some of these gaps. But how many kids can you get to? I mean, you should have a line out the door.
I do. Unfortunately, I do have to turn some families away because I do have some families that we're helping for free, but I cannot help everyone for free, right? Okay. My program primarily focuses on African American Black children. As I look at the data and I see how we're consistently at the bottom and I'm like, this doesn't make sense, right? And so the approach that I use is you can't be what you can't see, what Marion Wright Edelman says. So having a college student that looks like you, that may have been a foster kid, that may have had an IEP, that had learning issues with math,
Mm.
didn't know how to punctuate a sentence properly, but they got help and they did what they needed to do, and they still have a mentor that's helping to support them through college, showing them that that is a possibility is really what one of my main goals is, right?
So let me help you out and be even more empirical about it. If you have 0 and 100 and you average them together, they're 50,
Correct.
right? If you have 10 and 100 and you average is 55. So the further from the bottom, the better the overall average is. And I think that a lot of times that's what the current context doesn't realize. It's not a focus on Black children because they're Black. It's a focus on Black children because they aren't achieving as well. There's
Great.
a whole host of reasons that are cultural, that are institutional, that are societal. But whatever the reason, who cares? If that's where they are, that's where you
Let's
fix
help.
and you bring everybody up. And as you're saying, representation, and it's, I don't even look at it as a representation issue. I'm looking at it now, you have a point of connection and a point of commonality,
Hmm.
and I get so frustrated with this idea that, you can't help Black people because you're not Black or because they are Black or because, like, it drives me crazy. Look at the data. Do what the data says.
Right.
And I
Right.
love that that's the who you're focusing on. Our centers primarily focus on Black, Latino, lower income because Black people and Latino are not always lower income. So we segregate and say lower income, language learners, homeless, and other disenfranchised populations. Because that's who's at the bottom. You
Hmm.
know, um, I just did a presentation to a group of CEOs and I showed them the California dashboard that articulates where students are. And they were like, wow, no wonder you do this. I mean, it was just simple. Like, of course you would. Why wouldn't you help? So you do not have to tiptoe. It is 100% reasonable to address that population because that's where the need is, you know?
Unfortunately, it's not always seen that way. And so, again, the tutoring mentoring piece focuses on that, but I help all
Yeah,
children
of course.
everywhere. I love all children. Always loved kids since I was in the second grade. Knew I was going to be a teacher. So, uh, and that's the issue. Especially a lot of our males, the Black males, they're angry
Mm,
for one reason or another. And so seeing someone, like I said, that may have been through what you've been through, and they've managed to say, you know what, in spite of,
mm,
I'm going to change my life.
mm-hmm.
I can't control what happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And yes, I'm upset about it,
Right.
but I'm moving forward as best I can.
Yeah. Speaking of helping all children, by the way, everyone is in that learning gap.
Correct.
Everyone, it's no longer 0 and 100, it's 0 and 80, you know? So I am 100% on the page with you. And I love that you're trying to give people examples that they can follow, you know? And the irony is, isn't that what the worksheet says? Like, look at this example and do what it says, but we don't present examples so you can do what they say?
Right.
It is very much needed for all different kinds of kids to see all different kinds of people overcoming the challenges they have. Whether it's mental health challenges or circumstantial challenges. I mean, it's super important for everybody to see someone that's made it. You
Yeah.
know, as the leader of your organization, I'm sure you understand this feeling that it's isolating. You're like, who else is doing this? Who's my tribe? Who can I call to? Oh, I've got this issue. Oh, I've got. Everybody wants to have a someone that has something in common like that.
Yes.
And so your tutors, do they also provide support and help to the families as well?
Yeah, they're asked to sit in with, to check in with the families. I actually have a mom who went back to school and asked for her tutor to be able to help her with
Oh,
math. So it's now at the point where we're helping the parents through college. So I love that piece. I was actually shocked. I was like, "Wait, you want to be a part of the program?" She's like, "Yes." I don't think I'm going to make it through.
oh,
So yes. Yes.
that's fantastic. What's your best story? A best story that has happened that you've witnessed at your center? I know that's hard to choose. That's like your favorite child.
Oh, wow. They're all my favorites.
But like your
Well, the
best,
most recent
yeah,
one,
yeah.
I have a young lady with learning difference, and she was failing math horribly. Like, Mom, I just don't get it. I went to their eighth grade awards assembly. She was one of those that was called for high honor roll. Mom didn't even know because her final report card hasn't come out yet. She didn't even know. She was like, I wasn't even there. I was like, yeah, I was looking for you. I didn't see you. But the little girl was telling her mom, she said, I get it now. She said, I understand it now. She said, Miss Jennifer takes her time and she breaks it down for me so that I could get it. And so for me, I love hearing that because she was terrified of math when we first got her. And now she's done so well that she's now on high honor roll. And her mom said that was the only class keeping her back, that
Oh,
math class.
wow.
So that's one. And I have several children who are autistic and they are shining. You know, they went from being a recluse to now they were quiet and to themselves. Now they're very sociable. Well, they're sociable. They're not very sociable. If they trust you, they're in with you. They're joking with the tutor and doing all of that stuff. So those little changes from children who were insecure and unsure of what they should and could do, to see them evolve
Mm,
and feel empowered to
mm,
do what they need to do for themselves and to know that they can make it, that is what the goal is at the
mm.
end of the day.
Oh,
So seeing
excellent.
them succeed, yes.
Well, that is a great way to wrap up our conversation. Tell everybody where we can find you, and when someone listens to this, how can they find you or get information? Where are you at in real life, on social media, and all the things?
Okay, so we have the for-profit arm, which is Sage Pathways, and you can find us at sagepathways.org. And our Instagram is at education and passion. And we recently ramped up our nonprofit arm so that we could start supporting the families that want the help, but we need to have funding to do so. And that is sagepathways-np.org. And we don't have any social media running with that yet. But if you go there, you can find out what's going on and reach out to us so that we can help you.
Well, it's been a delight. And, as you know, you're doing God's work, and it is very much appreciated and very much needed. And thank you so much for having a conversation with me.
Thank you for the invitation. And you
Excellent.
too are doing God's work. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate having you. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you have an idea for something you'd like to hear, just drop it in the comments. And we'll see you next time at Mrs. C's podcast.